She handed me the napkin like it was nothing, like it didn't have the power to detonate everything I believed about my life. I was sitting in my usual spot at Elio's diner, far corner booth by the window, coffee half finished, the sun slicing through the blinds and landing right on the worn leather menu I never bothered to open anymore. The waitress, Holly, who had been serving me breakfast for years, leaned down like she was going to refill my cup, but instead slid the folded square of paper toward me and walked away without saying a word. I opened it, and there, written in a quick, uneven scrawl, was a sentence that instantly made my mouth go dry. She's been coming here with someone else. Thursdays, 2 p.m., booth 6. I read it 3 times before I even reacted. It didn't say her name, but it didn't need to. Holly had seen me here with Claire enough times. She'd remembered our anniversary dinner. She always brought her a slice of that awful raspberry cheesecake Claire pretended to like because it made Holly smile. This wasn't a mistake. I didn't go home that afternoon. I drove around the block 7 times before parking in front of our house and sitting in the car until the sun dipped below the rooftops. Claire had called twice. I let it ring out both times. I watched the front door like a cop on a stakeout, not even sure what I was looking for. I wanted to see guilt or fear or something unusual in her posture as she stepped outside to water the plants. But she looked like herself, like the woman I kissed goodbye that morning while she tied her hair into a bun and asked if we had any more almond milk. I felt like I was the one who'd lost his mind, not her. But the napkin didn't lie. I kept it in my jacket pocket, folded and refolded so many times it was beginning to tear at the edges. The next Thursday, I came back. Same table, same time, same coffee. I waited. Booth 6 stayed empty until 1:58, when I saw her walk in wearing sunglasses, even though it was cloudy, and a beige trench coat that looked like it belonged in a 90s spy movie. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She sat down, ordered tea, and pulled out her phone. 2 minutes later, a man I'd never seen before walked in and sat across from her. He was taller than me, clean-shaven, well-dressed in that deliberate casual way people use when they want to appear effortless. They didn't touch. No kiss. No holding hands. But they leaned in close, laughed too easily, and twice she touched his wrist the way she used to touch mine when she wanted to ask for something without using words. When they left, I stayed seated, gripping my cup like it might keep me from falling apart. Holly came over, looked at the booth, then at me, and said quietly, "You saw it." I nodded. "I'm sorry," she said. "I couldn't keep watching it. You didn't deserve that." I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. I just nodded again and slipped a 20 under my plate before walking out into the cold March wind. That night, Claire made spaghetti and told me about a new client who wanted a logo rebrand. I watched her mouth move, listened to the cadence of her words, but nothing landed. I just kept picturing her at that booth, laughing, leaning in, betraying me with every casual gesture. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. I needed more. I needed something that would burn the doubt to the ground and leave me with the truth, even if it crushed me. And somehow, I knew it would. I just didn't know how much. The next Thursday, I was there before they opened. The cook hadn't even flipped the first burger, and Holly gave me a look like she knew I wouldn't be ordering anything today. She slid me a coffee anyway. No words, just a nod toward my usual booth. I didn't touch the cup. I just stared at the entrance like I expected it to come alive and confess. The idea of hiring someone to follow Claire had crossed my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want someone else telling me the truth. I needed to see it with my own eyes, so when it would hit with all its weight and no room left for denial. At 1:47, she walked in again. This time, no sunglasses, just a gray hoodie and jeans, her hair tied back the same way she wore it when she was working around the house. She looked around once and slid into booth 6. The man came in 4 minutes later, carrying a bag from someplace downtown. They didn't touch, again. She smiled. He grinned. They leaned in close. I watched his hand rest on the table, open, expectant, and I watched her place her hand in his like it was normal. Like it had happened 100 times. No hesitation. That was the worst part. It wasn't new. It wasn't a mistake. It was practiced. I stood up and left before I threw something. My hands were shaking, and I didn't trust myself not to blow the whole thing wide open in a place that didn't deserve the drama. The cold outside helped. I walked around the block twice before getting into my car. I waited. 22 minutes later, They came out together. She said something and laughed, covering her mouth. He touched her back, not in a way that would be noticed by someone passing by. Just a light touch, the kind you give someone when you've done it before, when you're comfortable. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed beside her while she scrolled through her phone, giggling at some video. I stared at the ceiling, counting each breath to keep from saying anything. I was exhausted, but my brain wouldn't shut down. I needed something solid. Something with her name on it. Proof. So the next day, while she was at a client meeting, I went into her office. I wasn't even sneaking around. I moved the way I always did, like I was getting the stapler or a charger. I checked her calendar first. Just names and vague labels. But booth 6 was there. Thursday, 2 p.m., listed as weekly sync. She didn't even bother hiding it. I opened her laptop. She never logged out. Emails, mostly clean. But I knew where to look. The design software she used had a file history. I clicked it. At least 7 files, all updated on Thursdays. Every single one titled after initials I didn't recognize. They weren't client names. They were his. I checked the file info. One of them was saved just a few hours after I saw them together. I opened it. A sketch. Him. Sitting in booth 6. The detail was insane. She'd drawn his jawline. The way his shirt folded when he leaned forward. Even the coffee mug in front of him. It was him, and she'd drawn him like someone in love would. I copied everything onto a flash drive and put the laptop back exactly how I found it. I didn't want her to know I'd been there. Not yet. I needed one more thing, the thing that would take all the guessing out of it. That night, I waited until she fell asleep, then I checked her bag. She always kept a sketchbook there, one she claimed was full of client concepts. I flipped through it, page after page, and there he was again. Not just in the diner, but on a park bench, in a car, at some kind of loft. One drawing showed him lying down, shirtless, arms above his head, and the shading she used on his skin made my throat go tight. The last page was the worst. It was the two of them together, her face half hidden behind his shoulder, smiling. I stared at it for what felt like an hour. I should have been angry. I should have felt rage, but all I felt was something in my chest twisting into something I didn't recognize. It wasn't just betrayal. It was realization that she had made space in her life for someone else, and that space used to belong to me. When she stirred beside me, I slipped the sketchbook back and lay down again. She didn't wake. She never does when she sleeps like that, like the world outside doesn't matter. I stared at the ceiling, not counting breaths this time, just listening to her breathe. Slow, even, like nothing had changed. But everything had. She came home later than usual on Friday, hair damp from a shower and a takeout bag in hand. I watched her set it down on the counter and pretend everything was fine. She asked if I was hungry, if I had a good day, if I remembered that her sister's birthday was next weekend. I didn't answer any of it. I waited until she poured herself a glass of wine, leaned against the counter, and finally noticed the silence wasn't casual. She turned, saw my face, and frowned like I was the one being weird. I told her we needed to talk, and the way she froze told me everything I already knew. She didn't ask why or about what. She just gave this quiet nod like someone bracing for impact. I didn't wait. I told her about the napkin. I told her I'd been at Elio's, watching her sit with him like it was their tradition, not ours. I told her I saw her laugh, draw him, touch his wrist, and sketch him shirtless in a notebook she claimed was full of logo drafts and typography studies. She stared at me for a second, still holding the wine glass, and said the stupidest thing I've ever heard her say. "It's not what you think." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe she'd actually pulled that line out of the cliché bin and tried it on me like it would work. I told her to open her sketchbook. She didn't move. I got up, walked into the bedroom, pulled it out of her bag, and tossed it on the table in front of her. She didn't touch it. She just said, "Why were you going through my stuff?" And that's when I lost it. I told her she didn't get to flip it around. She didn't get to ask questions like she was the one who had been violated. I told her I had been sleeping next to a stranger who smiled in my face and kissed me goodbye while keeping a whole other life hidden like it was some harmless secret. She started crying. I think she thought that would help. I think she thought it would slow me down. It didn't. I asked her how long it had been going on. She said they were just friends. I asked again. She said they talked a lot, that he was going through things, that she just listened. I asked again. She said they had kissed once, but that was all. I told her I wasn't stupid. I told her I'd been in that diner. I watched her hold his hand. I saw the sketch of him in bed. I saw the drawing of them together, like a couple, like we never were. Her crying stopped, just like that. She put the wine glass down, wiped her eyes, and sat at the table like she'd finally realized the game was up. She said it started 3 months ago, that he was a former client, that he was funny, easy to talk to, made her feel seen. I asked if I made her feel invisible. She said that wasn't fair. I asked if she slept with him. She looked down. That was all I needed. I asked if it was more than once. She didn't answer. I asked if she loved him. She shook her head, said it wasn't about love. It was about feeling something different, something new. I asked her why she didn't just leave if she wanted something different. She said she didn't want to hurt me. I laughed again, not because it was funny. I told her she didn't avoid hurting me. She just delayed it, multiplied it, dragged it out like it was more humane that way. She said she was sorry. I told her that didn't fix anything. I asked if she was still seeing him. She said no. I asked if she planned to. She said she didn't know. That was when I stood up. I couldn't sit across from her anymore. I told her I needed space. She asked where I was going. I said nowhere yet, but I would. She said we should talk more in the morning, when we'd both calmed down. I said no. We'd talk when she was ready to tell the truth without editing it to make herself look better. She asked if I wanted to go through her phone. I said no. I'd already seen enough. She went to bed without saying another word. I sat in the kitchen until the sun came up, not because I was thinking, but because I couldn't move. I couldn't sleep in that bed. I couldn't be near her, not after hearing how easy it was for her to lie to me, night after night, while pretending everything was fine. I heard her get up, shower, move around the house like she was just starting another normal day. She walked past me in the hallway, didn't say anything. I didn't either. I didn't tell anyone for the first 2 days. I needed time to think without all the noise. I stayed in the guest room and barely left it except to eat and shower, and even then I waited until I knew she was out of the way. She kept trying to talk, knocking on the door, leaving food outside like I was sick or recovering from surgery. I ignored it. I wasn't interested in hearing more carefully worded excuses. What I wanted was something else entirely, something that would make her feel the weight of what she had done, not just in tears or apologies, but in real, undeniable consequences. She had made her choices. Now I was going to make mine. On Sunday afternoon, while she was in the shower, I took her laptop from the living room and sat on the floor of the guest room. It wasn't hard to guess her password, just the name of our dog and the year we got married. She still hadn't changed it, probably didn't think she needed to. I copied every drawing of him onto a flash drive. Every sketch, every image, even the rough ones she hadn't finished. I went through her emails too, found nothing there, but her browser history told me what I needed. She had sent him a folder, a digital package of the work she claimed she was still refining. She sent it to his email just 3 days ago. She hadn't stopped. She'd just gotten quieter. I printed all of it the next day at work. Used the office printer early in the morning before anyone else got in. Dozens of pages, each one a different scene of their time together. Some of them were borderline professional. A few were unmistakably personal. I packed them into a clean white envelope and wrote his name on the front. I knew where he lived. I'd found the address in the sketchbook, where she'd drawn a view from his apartment window and labeled it with a note to herself. I checked it against Google Maps. It matched exactly. On Tuesday, I left the envelope on his doorstep at 6 in the morning, rang the bell once, and walked away. I didn't want to confront him. I wasn't interested in his side of anything. I just wanted him to see what she had done, to see how exposed she was, how easily I could wreck whatever they thought they had. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. He'd know who it came from. He'd know what it meant. That afternoon, I logged into our joint cloud account. The one she always forgot was shared. It was synced with her phone. I downloaded every photo she had taken with him. They weren't many, but they were enough. I used one of those to create a new Instagram account with her name and photo. Just her. No context. No bio. Then I uploaded one of the drawings, the one where they were together on the couch, his arm around her, both smiling. I set the profile to public and followed everyone on her contact list. Her friends, her clients, her family. It took less than 2 hours for her to notice. She burst into the room with her phone in one hand and a panicked look on her face, yelling about someone hacking her name and trying to ruin her life. I didn't even look up. She said it again, louder this time, accusing me directly. I asked her what life there was left to ruin. She went quiet. I asked if she wanted me to keep posting. I had more. Her expression changed instantly. No more outrage, no more panic, just fear. She asked what I wanted. I told her I didn't want anything from her. Not now. But I wanted her to know how quickly everything could fall apart. I wanted her to feel it. She stood there, silent, trying to figure out whether to beg or fight. I deleted the account in front of her without saying a word. She walked out without another word either. I packed a bag that night. Not because I was leaving for good, but because I needed space where she couldn't follow. I stayed with my cousin on the other side of town. I didn't explain much, just said I needed a few nights away from the house. He didn't ask questions. Claire called 3 times. I didn't answer. She sent 2 texts, both vague and careful, like she was afraid to say anything too direct in case it came back to haunt her. I ignored those 2. On Thursday, I returned to Elios. Holly saw me come in and didn't say anything. She just brought over a cup of coffee and left it in front of me without asking. I sat in my booth and stared at the window. Booth 6 was empty. I waited an hour. Still empty. Either she got the message or she figured I was watching. It didn't matter which. What mattered was that she didn't show. She called me again on Sunday evening. I was still at my cousin's place, lying on the pull-out couch and watching the ceiling, pretending the texture of the drywall held some answer I hadn't figured out yet. I let the phone ring the first time, then again, and on the third try I picked it up without speaking. She asked if I could come home and talk. She said she didn't want to text, didn't want to leave a voicemail, didn't want anything recorded or digital. I asked if she was afraid I'd use her words against her. She didn't say no, which was all the answer I needed. I told her I'd be home the next day, and then I hung up. When I got home on Monday afternoon, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and something burning faintly underneath, like she'd left a candle too close to something that couldn't take the heat. She was sitting on the edge of the couch, not curled up or reclined, just upright with her hands folded like she was waiting for a sentence to be read out. I didn't sit. I dropped my bag in the hallway and stayed standing. She asked if I was going to say anything. I told her no, not yet, not unless what she had to say was worth hearing. She nodded once, said she deserved that, then started talking. She said she hadn't seen him since everything came out, that she hadn't spoken to him either. She said he tried to reach out, but she ignored it. I asked if she blocked him or just didn't respond. She said she muted the conversation. I asked if she still had the drawings. She said she didn't know how to throw them away. I asked if she still looked at them. She didn't answer. I told her that said enough. She said she didn't know why she did it, that it wasn't about love or sex or anything that simple. She said she felt something was missing, that she felt like she was disappearing a little more each day, and he made her feel like she still existed in a way that mattered. I asked her why she didn't tell me that before sleeping with someone else. She said she didn't think I'd understand. I told her that was the most insulting thing she could have said to me. She said she didn't mean it like that. I said it didn't matter how she meant it. What mattered was that she didn't even give me a chance to be part of the problem before she decided to go find someone else to solve it. She asked if I wanted to stay married. I told her I didn't know. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I said maybe, but forgiveness didn't mean things went back to normal. It didn't mean trust magically came back. It didn't mean we'd ever be what we were before. She said she'd do anything to fix it. I asked her what that meant. She said she'd go to therapy, delete the sketches, get a new job if she had to. I told her that deleting files didn't erase the fact that she created them, that therapy didn't guarantee honesty, and that quitting her job would only matter if he still worked there. She said he didn't. I asked if she was sure. She said she heard he left. I asked who she heard it from. She didn't answer. She started crying again, not the dramatic kind from the first night, but the quiet kind that just happens when someone runs out of words. I sat down, finally, across from her. I told her I wasn't going to make a decision that day. I told her I needed time. She said she understood. I told her if we did stay married, things would be different. I said we wouldn't sleep in the same bed for a while. I said we'd separate finances until I could trust her again. I said she would be transparent about where she went and with who. She said she'd do all of that. I told her I didn't believe her yet. She nodded. We sat there in silence for almost half an hour. Max, our dog, came over and laid down between us like he could feel something thick in the air. She reached out to pet him. I didn't stop her. When I finally stood up, she asked if I was coming back to the bedroom. I told her no, not yet, maybe not for a long time. She asked if I'd at least eat dinner with her. I said I'd think about it. She didn't push. She just nodded again and said okay. I walked upstairs without saying anything else. A week passed, and nothing changed between us, except now the silence felt scheduled. We moved around each other like roommates who didn't particularly like one another, but had agreed not to fight for the sake of peace. She stayed on her side of the house, did her work, cleaned up after herself, left me alone, and I didn't ask questions. I ate alone most nights. Sometimes she would ask if I wanted her to make something, and I'd shake my head or say I already ate. She stopped asking after day 4. She knew where things stood. I wasn't trying to punish her anymore. I had already done that, but I wasn't ready to pretend we were rebuilding something either. I didn't know what I wanted, which is why I didn't make any decisions. The only thing I knew for sure was that I didn't want to keep living in limbo. My cousin called and asked if I wanted to stay at his place again. I told him no. He asked if everything was okay. I said I didn't know. He didn't push me for more. It was the right move, because if he had, I probably would have said something I'd regret. I didn't need advice. I needed clarity, and that only comes from being alone with your own thoughts, not drowning them in someone else's opinion. I spent most of my evenings walking around the neighborhood. Not far, just enough to clear my head. Sometimes I'd pass by houses with their lights on and wonder how many of them were dealing with something similar, people pretending to be fine while silently bleeding in the background. But then I'd catch myself doing that, projecting, and I'd stop. I wasn't going to play the victim. I had choices. By the end of that second week, I asked her to sit down at the table. She looked surprised, but didn't say anything. I told her I wanted to talk about next steps, and that this wasn't going to be a back-and-forth negotiation. She said okay. I told her I was filing for separation. Not immediately. I wasn't throwing her out or changing the locks. I said we'd do it properly, legally, without drama. She asked why I'd made the decision. I said because I didn't want to wake up in a year and realize I wasted more time trying to fix something she broke without asking if I wanted it fixed. I told her the damage wasn't just about the affair. It was the way she kept it going while pretending we were okay, the way she smiled at me with his name still fresh in her mind. That kind of betrayal doesn't disappear with an apology or a clean sketchbook. She didn't argue. She asked if I hated her. I said no. I said if I hated her, I wouldn't feel anything at all, and that would make this easier. I said I didn't hate her, but I didn't recognize her either, and that was even worse. She asked if I thought we'd ever be able to reconnect. I told her I didn't plan to. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was finally seeing what I had ignored for a long time. I told her I wasn't happy for a while either. I said maybe I was quiet about it. Maybe I thought the routines were enough. Maybe I thought loving someone meant ignoring the signs when they started pulling away. But I also told her I didn't use that as an excuse to cross a line. She nodded and said she understood. We talked about what to do with the house. I said I'd move out first, that I already had a temporary place lined up through someone at work. She offered to go instead. I told her I didn't care who left, as long as we were clear that it was just a formality. She said she'd handle telling her family. I said I'd take care of mine. We agreed to split the bank account for now and keep the dog with her until I got settled. She thanked me for not making it worse than it needed to be. I said she already did that. By the time I left the table, I felt a strange sense of calm. Not peace. Not closure. Just clarity. I packed over the next 3 days, and she didn't hover. She kept to herself, helped where necessary, didn't try to guilt me or stop me. I appreciated that more than I expected. On my last night in the house, she knocked on the guest room door and asked if we could talk one more time. I said sure. She sat on the floor across from me and asked if I'd ever look at her the same again. I said probably not. She asked if I believed she was sorry. I said maybe, but I didn't think it mattered anymore. She said she didn't know what her life would look like without me. I told her that made 2 of us. Then she asked something I didn't expect. She asked what I learned from all of this. I told her I learned that I can't love someone into being honest. I said I learned that trust isn't a switch, it's a slow climb, and once it snaps, it doesn't just come back. I said I learned I could survive something I thought would break me. She didn't speak after that. We sat there for a while, quiet, just letting it hang. The next morning, I left the key on the kitchen counter, gave the dog one last scratch behind the ears, and walked out the front door. She didn't try to stop me, and I didn't look back. I didn't need to.